All set to go. Good afternoon, everybody. Today is a special and exciting day for the Denver Broncos. And on behalf of Pat Bowlen, our entire organization, our fans, we'd like to welcome Coach Vic Fangio to the Denver Broncos and to our community. 10 days ago, John Elway began the very important task of finding us the next head coach to lead our team. He interviewed several candidates. The process was exhaustive, thorough, and very, very thoughtful. And I really want to commend John, his staff, the guys that helped him, Mark Thews, Patrick Smythe, and Matt Russell. But solely to John, I just thank him for really a thorough understanding of how this needed to be conducted and following through on it with every detail. In talking to John Tuesday, I could clearly see his enthusiasm and excitement and conviction that Vic was the right coach to lead us into the future. And yesterday I met with Vic for about 30 minutes, and it's clear that his experience, his intelligence, his attention to detail, and his ability to teach players and put them in a position to be successful came through in my conversation with him. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to John. And Vic, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Joe, and welcome everybody. We're thrilled to welcome Vic Fangio as our next head coach of the Denver Broncos. I'd like to say thank you. We interviewed 4 other tremendous candidates who all did a tremendous job, and I want to thank them for the time and all the time that they spent with us, and they all did a tremendous job, and at some point in time they'll all be head coaches in this league, I'm sure, and so I want to thank them very much. I'd like to say I know the game in the NFL is changing, but I believe the things that still are about what football is all about, to me, is what Vic Fangio is all about. And what is that? I believe that football is still built from the ground up. And I think Vic is built from the ground up. Now, what do I mean by that? Discipline, accountability. He holds his team to high standards, emphasis on teaching, technique, fundamentals, blocking, tackling. Those are all the basis of what the NFL is still about, even though the game's changing. And the thing is, when we had a chance to sit down with Vic, all those things I just talked about were his emphasis, and how he teaches his team and how he gets his team going in the right direction. And it starts from the ground up. Not only that, then you get to the board, and you have the X's and O on the board, and there's a lot of tremendous coaches that are great at X's and O's. But Vic's background on the defensive side is unmatched, and the success that he's had on the defensive side is unmatched. And so we're thrilled. I'm thrilled that Vic is our next head coach. I believe he is exactly what we needed when it comes down to the things I've talked about, when it talks about the attention to detail. And the one thing, and I'm sure you all hear it many, many times from here on out, and the one thing that stuck out for me in his interview was he talked about death by inches. And that has always stood out, and it will always stand up, and I'm sure you're going to hear him say it many times. But death by inches is when you keep taking an inch, and you keep taking an inch, and you keep taking an inch. Those inches add up. And when those inches add up, you're in a losing program. And he says, I promise you, we will not kill ourselves by inches. And I thought that was the best thing that he had said in the interview. And so, as I said, I'm thrilled that Vic chose us, and we chose Vic. And I'm glad to introduce our 17th head coach of the Denver Broncos to you, Vic Fangio.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I have a few things I need to get through before I open it up to your questions. I want to thank John, Joe, and the entire Denver organization for the honor of being the head coach of the Denver Broncos. It is a privilege, first and foremost, and a responsibility that is going to get my maximum effort 24/7. John has been great through this process, and I look forward to us building that bond that will get us through the adversities that we will eventually come across that are inevitable in the NFL, and eventually getting us to the mountaintop. I also want to thank Pat Bowlen and his entire family for making the Broncos one of the flagship franchises in this league. I've been in the NFL since 1986, And I know that the Broncos, only one other franchise in this league has won more Super Bowls and been to more Super Bowls. And I accept the responsibility of leading us to more. I have to give some further thanks to some people that have helped me throughout my career. I first want to thank the Chicago Bears, Virginia, and George McCaskey for running an honorable and first-class operation there. It was a great experience for me there, and I had nothing but good things and good feelings from leaving there. And you can thank George. I talked to George yesterday, and I said to him, George, can I do the press conference tomorrow in my gray sweats? He calls it my gray business suit. He said, no, you can't do that. So he gave me this tie to wear. So this tie is compliments of George McCaskey and the Chicago Bears. I want to thank Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace for all their support through this process of the last few days and their great leadership that they've provided the Chicago Bears that finally culminated in a good season this year. Seeing Matt become a first-time head coach this year and also run the offense besides being the head coach has been a great resource for me for what I'm about to undertake. And he did a tremendous job for the Chicago Bears, and the Bears are lucky to have him. I want to thank my parents for doing something right and raising me to get me to this point. My father did pass 27 years ago, but there's not a day go by that I don't think of him at some point. And my 92-year-old mother is back in Pennsylvania, and if it's snowing there today, she's out there shoveling the snow. I want to thank Jack Henses, my high school coach, for his passion and excellence in football and in coaching. It is what motivated me and strived. I caught his passion for the game, and I decided from that point on that I wanted to be a football coach. I want to thank Jim Mora, who I worked for 14 years in pro football. He gave me my first opportunity at a very young age because he saw something in me and he believed in me, and I want to thank him for that. I want to thank Joe Marciano, a fellow coach who looked out for me before I was in pro football and was helping me along the way in my journey and introduced me to Jim Mora. Without that relationship I had with Joe and the introduction to Jim Mora, maybe I wouldn't be here today. To all the head coaches that I have worked for and all the assistant coaches I have worked with, my sincere thanks. You know, it's never a one-man's job. It's a lot of people working together for one common goal. Finally, to all the players that I have worked with, this would have never been possible without them buying into me and ultimately their great play that they put on the field for our teams. Special thanks to the great group I just left in Chicago. It's a special group, a group that I thoroughly enjoyed coaching and will miss coaching. The great groups in San Francisco right before that for all their great play and what they have meant for me. All the way back to the linebackers in New Orleans in 1986 when I started coaching, better known as the Dome Patrol. What those guys did for me was set the bar high. And once the bar is set high, then you don't accept much less. So when I'm looking at players, I know what a good player looks like because these guys set the bar high. Behind every successful coach are good players who execute the plan and believe in the team. Good teams have good players, but great teams have great teammates. And we will be obsessed with building that here. One of the coolest things that's happened for me over the last week or so, up until accepting this job here, is the amount of texts and calls that I have received from former players I have been with all the way back to 1986 to the current players with the Bears. Great relationships last a lifetime, and I'm looking forward to building some of those here moving forward with the Broncos. Rather than me pontificating up here, I would like to open it up to your guys' questions.
Vic, what was the most enticing thing about this job and this opportunity? And secondly, what is your plan at quarterback?
Well, it's hard to pick out one thing that was most enticing. So I'll name a few. One, the tradition of this franchise, which I mentioned. You know, Pat Bowlen and his family and the work that he put in through uplifting this franchise to the level it's at, you know, is unmatched in the NFL, and it's always been looked upon that way, me from the other people in the NFL. So to join this organization, the great fan base they have a record number of sellouts in all of sports, something along those lines, and the tradition. And those are some of the things that attracted me to this job. And your second question was?
What's your plan at quarterback?
Well, right now, Case Keenum is our quarterback. And I've had the good fortune, or misfortune, since I'm standing here, good fortune, of seeing him at the best in his career when he played for Minnesota last year, being in our division at the time. So I know what he's capable of, and we're going to try and get that out of him.
Vic, what makes you ready now? You've been successful for 3 decades, but you hadn't interviewed for a while. What makes this right? Why are you ready? And was it because you weren't a self-promoter? Maybe you weren't in this position years ago?
Well, there's a long answer to that, but basically I've always felt I've never fit the match of the profile of what certain teams were looking for. Or, you know, I was with teams that weren't succeeding at that time. Fortunately, I matched the profile of what John was looking for, and we formed a good marriage.
Coach, what role will Gary Kubiak have in your organization? Right here, Coach. Sorry. What role will Gary Kubiak have?
None of the assistant coaching positions have been determined yet, and until things are ironed out and ironclad, I'd prefer not to comment on that. But Gary's a hell of a coach. He's a guy that I have respected throughout my career in the NFL, having competed against him at several stops and him at several stops. And if Gary's interested, then I'm interested.
Vic, the view and the responsibilities are always different when you move into the bigger office. I'm guessing through the years you've envisioned what type of head coach you will be. Can you share with us the description of Vic Fangio, head coach?
Well, I mean, you guys will be here daily with us once we get back on the field, and you'll be able to figure that out yourself. But we're not going to cut any corners, okay? I'm a fundamental coach. I think the game of the NFL, everybody thinks has changed, and it's a high-scoring league, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But fundamentals is still what wins in this league. And I'm going to stress those. We're not going to cut any corners. There will be no death by inches. We're going to stress fundamentals.
Hey, Vic. End of the game Sunday, less than about 12 hours later, you have the interview with the Broncos. How big of a challenge was it to reset and get ready for that interview?
Well, you know, obviously there's the disappointment and the sudden end of the season and the shock of the game. Those emotions you have to get through. Once the game was over, I went back to my office after a few hours of mourning and put together something to present to John and his guys. And it was easy for me because I didn't have to make a fancy presentation. I just took the stuff that I use daily and yearly. So I didn't have to work too hard to do that. But it's been a whirlwind, and but it's had a happy ending.
Coach, how would you determine success in your first year here with the Broncos?
That my determination of success, ultimately, everybody will look to the win-loss record. But it is my goal and purpose to make every individual player improve and get better. If we do that within his position group, that position group will be better. If we do that, that side of the ball, whether it be offense, special teams, or defense, will be better. And ultimately, we'll have a better team, which will lead to a better record, okay? So you got to start from the ground up, okay? So we're trying to get better every day.
Vic, when John looked at you and said, what are your plans on offense, for example, what did you say? Or what constitutes your philosophy on offense?
Well, we talked about an offensive philosophy, and I believe in balance, but balance immediately comes to your mind, run, pass. There's other things that need to be balanced in offensive play. Do you throw it short, intermediate, deep? Do you run it inside, outside, have deceptives? Do you run gap schemes, zone schemes? Are you play action, movement passing game? So when I say balance, I'm not necessarily talking about how many runs, how many passes. You need to have balance within your passing game and in your running game, okay? I know that from having to defend it. So that's what we're looking to do.
Coach, right here. Congratulations on becoming the head coach, first and
Thank you.
foremost. In your coaching experience, what are keys to developing young talent?
By doing a great job of coaching them. Now, what does that mean? First off, you start from the ground up. You give them their assignments. And then once they've mastered their assignments, you now teach them the correct techniques to execute those assignments. Sounds simple, sounds like a stock answer, but that's what it is. If you do a great job of coaching them, and the players will realize that, they will buy in, and they will execute for you to the maximum of their abilities.
Yeah, Coach, your defense went to another level when you got Khalil Mack and Roquan Smith. Do you see similarities here with Von Miller, and I know it's a different position, but Bradley Chubb, and what this defense can be?
Well, obviously we have, starting off, two good players on the outside. You know, Von Miller can be one of the rare players in this league, much like Khalil is. And I'm looking forward to working with both of them. Bradley's a guy that we had high grades on also in Chicago last year, and I'm aware that he had a good season this year. That's my position of expertise when I'm coaching a position, and those guys are going to get coached by their position coach, but they're going to get a little extra from me too, and we're going to try and take them both to bigger and better levels. And I think Von Miller can play even better than he's played in his career.
Vic, what's your 92-year-old mother's name, and does she let you wear your gray sweats to the dinner table at her house?
Her name is Alice. Yeah, once you hit a certain age, I've kind of, when I go back to visit her, her iron hand, she's lost her iron hand over me. But she's still very active, walks everywhere, very active, very sharp, and she's gonna outlive a bunch of us in this room. What's that? Absolutely. Since my father has passed, he might have whacked me if I did.
Vic, with NFL offense is kind of trending towards a lot of college trends and things like that. How have you sort of changed the way that you've coached and the way that you've schemed? How much have you evolved, even late, kind of in your coaching tenure?
You know, we have to evolve on defense to defend what the offenses are doing. So there has been evolution. I don't want to get into the exact X and O details because you probably wouldn't understand them anyway. And I don't want to give an opponent any insight into my thinking. But it has involved an evolution. And the biggest evolution in football that's happened in the last few years is you don't see fullbacks on the field much, which I'm not saying is right or wrong. You're seeing 3 wide receivers on the field most of the time. I believe in Chicago this past year, we defended 82 or 3% of the plays we were on defense, there was 3 wide receivers on offense. So that to me is the biggest change in football. So you've substituted either a fullback or a second tight end with a 3rd wide receiver. So the game's trended towards the speed of the wide receivers and spreading it out.
Coach, is being an NFL head coach something you've dreamed about for a while, and what might make this a dream job?
I don't want to use the word dream. It's obviously something I thought about throughout my career at various times, but I was comfortable enough in my own skin that it didn't have to happen. I was happy with being a defensive coordinator in the NFL for close to 20 years. If a good situation ever arose and I matched what a certain team was looking for, I'd be all in. And I believe I found that here, and I'm all in.
Coach, obviously lots of Broncos fans are excited you're here, but it's my understanding that everywhere you've been, the baseball team in that city has done fairly well. The Cubs win the World Series, the Giants, the Astros go to the World Series. You're a Phillies fan, so you're a big baseball guy. Is that good news for the Rockies?
It should be. I'd be happy if I were them. I mean, the Cubs broke a 100-and-some-year jinx when I got to town. The Giants in San Francisco never won anything. And then they won 3 out of the 5 years I was there. They won 3 World Series. Houston never won anything, went to their only World Series up until that point. So things might be looking up for the Rockies.
Hey, Vic, you talked about death by inches. So what are the things that you believe in doing on an everyday basis? You talked about fundamentals, building attention to detail, doing on the practice field and in meetings to prevent that death by inches.
When you see a small misdemeanor crime that's an inch crime, you correct it. Here's what death by inches means, okay? If you're running a meeting, whether it be a team meeting, defense meeting, a position coach meeting, and a player walks in, say, 30 seconds late, 45 seconds late. And that act in and of itself really has no impact on whether you're going to win or lose that week. But if you let it slide, you know, the next day there's 2 or 3 guys late. Or it went from 30 seconds to 2 minutes. And it causes an avalanche of problems. And that's death by inches.
Coach, as far as becoming a head coach, you mentioned that you had thought about it but didn't have to happen. When it did happen, what were your emotions, and was your mom one of the first people you reached out to? Who did you reach out to when you officially became a head coach?
She was definitely one of the first. I don't remember the first. What was the second part?
Just what were your emotions?
The emotions. The same emotions that I had when just amped up. You know, when I became a defensive coordinator in 1995, you know, you're a position coach for 9 years in the NFL, and now I'm all of a sudden a defensive coordinator. You always know you can do it or believe you can do it, and it's easy to believe you can do it when you're not doing it. And then now all of a sudden you get the responsibility and the position. It's like, okay, you wanted it, you got it, you better succeed. Okay? So that's my first feelings, you know. Okay, I got it, let's go, prove it.
Coach, obviously for years you've been calling the defensive signals as a defensive coordinator. If you continue to do that as a head coach, why in your mind would it be important for you to continue to call the defensive signals as the head coach?
Several reasons. One being, you know, they hired me because of my work on the defensive side of the ball, and I'm going to give them my work on the defensive side of the ball. I believe, for the most part, I'm pretty good at it, so I'm going to do it. You know, there's several offensive head coaches that still call plays. Not all of them, but I will have a staff that I will work close with. They will understand everything we want to do and are doing, and I think it's important that I do it, and I want to do it and look forward to it.
Vic, if or when Gary Kubiak is officially named the offensive coordinator, how much do you think you will lean on him because of his experience as a head coach, specifically here?
Well, you're jumping the gun here a little bit.
That's why I said yeah.
Yeah. I think you're just trying to sideways me, give me a low blow there, So I'll answer that when we know more. But I'll answer the thought behind your question. Matt Nagy, first-time head coach in Chicago this year, and everybody thought, and even Matt said it when we first met, hey, I'm going to lean on you and all your experiences to help get me through this if I need to. Well, he leaned on me 2 or 3 times, So whoever we have on this staff and their experiences, if I have to lean on them more than a few times, then I'm in trouble.
Coach, when you began your coaching career in 1979, what were your career goals and aspirations at that time?
Good question. When I started coaching, all I wanted to do was be a teacher, a high school coach, and be a head high school coach eventually. That's all I wanted to do at that time. Things happen, People notice that you're pretty good at something. They tell you you should go try and do this, and so you put yourself out there, take a job at a, lower level college, go to another higher, and the ball starts happening. And the rest is history. But I got into coaching to be a head high school coach. And people noticed me, told me I should do more. I tried it, and so far it's been good.
Coach, you've been lauded for attention to detail, for making a team much more disciplined. What goes into that? How can you make this Broncos team more disciplined than they were last season?
Well, we had a lot of great statistical numbers this past year in Chicago, but one that gets overlooked by most but not by me is we were the second least penalized defense in the NFL this past year, and I believe I was told today that 3 out of the last 4 years we were in the top 5 in least penalized. And there are ways to coach and what we're really talking about is execution. Discipline's a broad term that people use too loosely. We just want to, if you play with good technique, you will avoid being penalized too many times, okay? Some penalties are just going to happen. They happen in the competition of the game. Some are more avoidable, and we're going to work hard to avoid those. And there are ways to teach that and emphasize that, and we are going to do that.
Final 2, Troy and then Les.
Vic, Khalil Mack apparently doesn't talk a lot at the media about stuff, but he described you in terms it was an honor to play for you, but he described you as an evil genius. What did you think he meant by that?
I don't know. Conflicting words there, right? Evil and genius. I think he meant it as a compliment, obviously. I think it's more of a young person's term these days to combine those 2 words, but I think Khalil, when he got to us, didn't know what to expect. Obviously, it was under unusual circumstances, a week before the regular season starts. And I think what he was alluding to in a little way was how quickly he was able to learn our system and be able to play immediately and play effectively and not hurt the team because of his lack of exposure to training camp, et cetera. So I think, not to put words in his mouth, was how easy it was for him to transition in to our system that we believe is easy to learn is, I believe, what he's talking about.
Vic, how much input do you believe you'll have in personnel? How much would you like to have in personnel? And what have you and John worked out in that regard?
Well, we're going to work together on all of that stuff. I know that's a stock answer, but we're just going to work together on it. John, when it comes draft day and when it comes time to pick the final 53 of the team, if there's arguments or disputes that we can't settle through thorough discussion, it's John's baby.
Thank you very much, Coach. We'll do a photo opportunity. In between? Yes, sir.